I don't even know what's real anymore. Waffles or aliens. I mean, we are in that week of April Fool's Day where you don't know if Krispy Kreme is really making a pickle donut. It wasn't real, but man, God, do I wish it was. Or you don't even know if it's real if a FEMA director really teleported to Waffle House. And I say all of that, not because anything I'm about to tell you is a joke, but because I genuinely cannot believe I'm about to say the things on camera that I'm about to say. While we're facing real issues, Iran, healthcare, living through the most consequential constitutional crisis in a generation at least. And yet, here we are. Because sometimes the universe just hands you a FEMA official who claims he teleported to a Waffle House, a former congressman who was briefed on an alien-human hybrid breeding program, and the Vice President of the United States swearing that aliens are just demons anyway. And you have to set the hard-hitting geopolitics aside for a few minutes and just bask in the absurdity of it all. Time is a flat circle, up is down, left is right, cats and dogs living together. And Gregg Phillips is the Associate Administrator for the Office of Response and Recovery at the Federal Emergency Management Agency. That's lots of words to say that he's the man. He's the man in charge of the federal government's disaster response. When a hurricane hits, when tornadoes tear through the Midwest, when flooding destroys communities, Gregg Phillips is the guy. He oversees billions of dollars in emergency funds, and he is, by title, the person responsible for the physical safety of Americans in their most vulnerable moments. Gregg Phillips also has teleported multiple times. They were these teleportation events against his will, of course, including, though, once to a Waffle House. No, he really said this on a January 2025 podcast. Quote, "I was with my boys one time and I was telling them I was going to go to Waffle House and get Waffle House. And I ended up at a Waffle House. This was in Georgia, and I end up at a Waffle House like 50 miles away from where I was. And they said, 'Where are you?' And I said, 'A Waffle House.' And a Waffle House where? And I said, 'Waffle House in Rome, Georgia.' And they said, 'That's not possible. You just left here a moment ago.' But it was possible. It was real." That was his quote. That's what he said. It was real. He was absolutely certain about this. And it wasn't the only time, because in another incident, he said his car was lifted up while he was driving and transported approximately 40 miles from Albany, Georgia, before setting him down in a ditch near a church. Lifted up and placed in a ditch near a church against his will. Really, this guy was driving, and then he wasn't. And then he was in a ditch near a church 40 miles away. This was very real to the man in charge of our government's disaster response. And of course, people made fun of him. And when those people made fun of him for these completely reasonable claims, he responded on Truth Social, saying, "Haters gonna hate. I know what I've experienced." It's gonna be my next tattoo. He also wrote what has been described generously as a poem in which he invoked Jesus Christ rising from the dead as evidence that teleportation is real. He pointed to the Bible, which does contain several stories of people being moved by God, and said, quote, "The Bible has many examples of the power of God." Cool. Back up your crackpot teleportation stories with the Bible. Okay. Again, FEMA's Director of Disaster Response citing the resurrection of Christ as proof that his car teleported him to a ditch 40 miles away in Georgia. And I need to give you the kicker here, the absolute cherry on top. Phillips went to Truth Social, which again, if you don't know, that's Donald Trump's social media platform, and complained that Truth Social was blocking his posts about teleportation. I mean, that would be like me doing a YouTube video about how Google lost a lawsuit over YouTube. I would never. Anyway, Phillips messaged Devin Nunes, who is now running Truth Social, and said, "I've tried to post a response to my friend 6 times. Why are you blocking me and my ability to respond?" Yes, Trump's own social media platform is censoring Trump's own FEMA appointee's teleportation defense. Truth Social is apparently the only social media platform on earth that is conservative enough to suppress a government official's Bible-based teleportation argument. And by the way, speaking of Truth Social, if you're watching this, you're welcome. You are welcome because I go to Truth Social so you don't have to. And let me tell you, when I go to Truth Social, it's a lot. The insane ads, the crackpot rantings of our current president, the conspiracy wellness content all on one page, with so many pop-ups that it looks like visiting the wrong website on Netscape in 2003. I'm not exaggerating. And before I got to a single post this week, I had to dodge ads for keystroke lock, for people who think their keyboard is spying on them. And then the Epic Times, who, if you're not familiar, are essentially the Gregg Phillips of journalism in the sense that they fully believe every possible option except for the truth. They're running pieces about gabapentin being government mind control, forced organ harvesting, and apple cider vinegar curing everything. That's the content landscape that you have to navigate before you reach the posts about teleportation, and his teleportation defense was censored. I go there for you. I mean, Truth Social is a platform so absolutely committed to free speech that it's blocking its own users from discussing government-documented supernatural transport events. But it's absolutely going to tell you that your apple cider vinegar is a miracle cure. And this could be an isolated incident. It could just be one unwell guy in the government. But it's not, because Matt Gaetz, former congressman, Florida Man of the Year, multiple years, no longer a congressman because the Ethics Committee investigation into whether he did unspeakable things that were so damning, he resigned before the report could be released. And then Trump nominated him to be our nation's attorney general, which is a thing that really also happened. Gaetz, fortunately, was not confirmed, and he's now a free agent, and he was out there on a podcast this week. And Gaetz revealed something that he apparently sat on the entire time he was in Congress. Matt Gaetz was briefed by a uniformed United States Army officer about a secret government program. A secret program in which captured aliens were forced to breed with humans to create a hybrid race capable of intergalactic communication. I need to say that again. A secret program captured aliens forced to breed with humans. And they were abducted from war zones, by the way. And specifically, they were also abducted from migrant caravans.
The military ran a very secret program where aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
So just to make it clear, the people who can't stop talking about the threat from migrant caravans have apparently been sitting on the information that the U.S. Army was collecting migrants for an alien breeding program and didn't mention any of this at any of their border hearings. Not once. Matt Gaetz himself sat through years of immigration hearings and did not bring up once that the government had been harvesting caravan members for extraterrestrial reproduction programs. And this seems like the relevant context here because he said, quote, "I had someone come in and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. An actual uniformed member of the United States Army briefed me on that," end quote. He said 6 to 12 sites around the country, apparently. 6 to 12. They have locations. He knows the locations. And he sat on this information for years. And in fairness to Matt Gaetz, a phrase that disgusts me to say, he attributed this to a whistleblower, aka he blamed an unnamed source. He did not personally observe these programs. He did not personally witness the alien hybrid breeding. He was just told about it by a guy that said he was in the Army. And this is the same Matt Gaetz who has special compartmentalized security clearance for classified programs, and apparently cannot distinguish between a legitimate military briefing and a man dressed up in an Army costume describing his fan fiction. Matt Gaetz' threshold for, I was briefed on this by the actual Army, is pretty low. And meanwhile, the same podcast, drawing quite the guest list, or Vice President J.D. Vance appeared on the same podcast this past weekend and said that what most people call aliens or extraterrestrials are, quote, demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion, end quote.
Aliens.gov. I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
That's your Vice President of the United States. The Vice President thinks the aliens are demons. The FEMA director thinks he teleported there. The former congressman thinks that the aliens are being crossbred with caravan migrants. And somewhere in Washington, actual scientists are getting their funding slashed for actual scientific climate research. My mind is blown. And here's what I've got to say about all of this, because it's genuinely not just funny, it's also an indictment of what happens when you spend decades telling people that expertise doesn't matter, that the scientists are lying to you, that the establishment is hiding everything, that to have credentials is elitism, that the deep state is real and the man in a uniform who tells you that aliens are breeding with migrants is a whistleblower, rather than a person who needs genuine mental health support. You get Gregg Phillips running FEMA. You get almost Attorney General Matt Gaetz on podcasts discussing intergalactic hybrid communication programs. You get the effing Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, talking about aliens being demons. It is the human equivalent of AI slop. It's confident, it's authoritative sounding, and it's completely untethered from evidence. And it does not self-correct ever. You know, it reminds me of a time where Ricky Gervais, and he made this point on Stephen Colbert's show, and I think about this constantly. And I might get the words a little wonky here, but I'm going to paraphrase. He said something like this: if you took all of the works of fiction in the world, every novel, every holy book, every piece of scripture, and you burned them, you forgot about them, in 1,000 years, they'd all still be gone, destroyed, because they only exist as long as humans agree that they exist. But if you took every work of science in the world and you destroyed that, every paper, every textbook, every data set, in 1,000 years, they would all come back, every single one, because the tests would bear the same results. Gravity is there even if you don't believe in it. Viruses don't require faith. And the speed of light is not subject to revision based on whether or not you find it politically inconvenient. And sure, science does get things wrong. I'll be clear about that. Because the crowd that says science gets things wrong uses that as a gotcha. But that's the whole point of science. Science welcomes being wrong. Science gets new information and it updates itself. It publishes data so that other scientists can try to disprove it. And if they fail, they strengthen the finding. Or if they succeed in disproving it, they improve the science. Scrutiny is the feature, not the bug. The entire mechanism of science is designed to self-correct. When you replace that with a guy told me on a podcast, and the hater's gonna hate guy, and the Bible has many examples, you are not offering a real alternative to science. You're just turning off the error correction system and calling it freedom. Don't tread on me. And the result is FEMA leadership that believes in teleportation. former chairs of national security subcommittees who got briefed on alien crossbreeding programs and apparently filed it under, I'll bring this up later, and a vice president who thinks that ET is a demon. All posted and talked about on a true social algorithm that will run ads for apple cider vinegar curing cancer, but it's going to suppress a man's Bible-based defense of his involuntary transport to a Waffle House. We've burned the expertise down, calling it draining the swamp. And now the person in charge of hurricane response has been lifted by an invisible force into a ditch near a church in South Georgia. And I want to end this on something very personal and very sincere. Personally, I would love nothing more than to transport or teleport to a Waffle House. I genuinely would. Texas double patty melt, double plate, scattered, covered, topped. Oh, it's beautiful. If God herself wants to pick me up and deposit me in a Waffle House in Rome, Georgia, or Noonan, Georgia, or anywhere, I am absolutely available for that. I'll be the biggest believer. I have zero objections. But the difference between a guy like me and the head of FEMA disaster response is that I'm not going on podcasts claiming that it already happened. And I'm not writing poems about it on Truth Social. And I'm especially not running the federal government's emergency management office. That distinction at least feels important. And if you think it's important, that's where I will ask you to subscribe, to comment, to like, to share these stories. Because the algorithm is absolutely going to suppress a story about government officials and alien crossbreeding programs. And we just can't have that, especially when there's a Texas double patty melt out there with my name on it.